Welcome to Faith and Sustainability, a podcast where we explore how our faith traditions call us to care for our common home. I'm Leonard Robinson, your host and tour guide.
And I'm Kat Doyle, your co-host. This podcast is made possible through the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Okay, Leonard, let's get to it. Who are we talking to today?
Kat, today we have, all the way from California, Reverend Dr. Ambrose Carroll. He's one of the nation's leading practical theologians combining faith, ecology, and social justice to inspire transformative action. He's also the founder of Green the Church. This groundbreaking initiative has been featured by CNN, Jet Magazine, HuffPost, and now the Faith and Sustainability Podcast. Welcome to the intersection of faith and sustainability.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about what your faith journey has looked like over the years. How have you gotten to where you are today?
Well, again, I'm Ambrose. I am from Oakland, California, but the family is originally from Hollywood, that Holly, Louisiana, down in the woods.
Awesome.
And my faith journey starts, Holly is about 20 minutes out of Shreveport, Louisiana, and there was a faith community founded 1875 after the war. Freedmen came together and bought 100 acres of land, put the church and the graveyard in the middle, and began their trek. And I often talk about, in terms of my spiritual journey, noting that the spiritual journey of African Americans does not start after the war, does not even start in slavery, but these individuals had eons of Aboriginal and indigenous practices that they brought with them. And so they started the St. Mark Church. My mom and dad, both out of that church. Dad was a gospel minister as well. And so my faith journey started in a family of individuals from that pillage.
Did it start with a bang, or was it a subtle, like the rustle of the wind? When you came to that intersection, how did that transpire?
Earnestly, talking about my own faith journey, I remember, so my parents always talked about, growing up in having revivals and being in the morning bench. I was on the front row at a revival. I don't think it was a morning bench. I think it was just because I was pretty bud at 8 years old. And we say bud just because we don't use the A. And so they had me in the front of the church. But I remember hearing the pastor preaching, and I was, I think I was in between being awake and being asleep. But I remember he was talking about Elijah, and he was talking about that chariot coming down. And as the old saints say, my heart felt strangely warmed. And I remember that day giving my hand to the preacher and my heart to God.
You know what really struck me when you were telling that is there's this idea of the family footprints that you're walking in, the idea that St. Mark's was put on 100 acres of land. So not only did your faith journey start on that land, but it sounds like maybe a little bit of that intersection between your faith and sustainably living on the land took place at the same time.
Yeah, most definitely. And, my dad was an itinerant Baptist preacher. We lived in St. Louis and Santa Ana, California, Oakland, California. But every year, the family would travel back, no matter where we lived, to Holly, Louisiana, at a time in the late 70s where my grandparents did not have running water in the house, where they lived off the land, where we, shuck corn and pick peas and are able to reach down and pick up that watermelon with our hands. And so although they didn't have a lot, they lived a very sustainable life, fresh food, vegetables, so all of those things I think are part of why my family and I were able to lean into the environment, because we have a sense, even though we've lived in urban environments, redlined, we still have an idea of what it means to live with all of God's creation.
Tell us about Green the Church. What inspired it? What is Green the Church? And what inspired that?
Yeah, well, the story that I'm telling really inspires it. It is that duality coming from a place where pastors and deacons, not only were they the pastor and deacons, but they were actually also the farmers, right? They farmed the land. Not only did they share the word of God, but they shared their collard greens, right? And they shared their preservatives. And so for me, in 2009, I was a Green for All fellow with Van Jones, and my family and I had already started a ministry. My older brothers, I have two older brothers who are clergy and one younger sister, all pastors. And in the late 90s, we started something called Carroll Ministries International, really reaching back and telling the story of African-American families and really lifting family. And when I, ran into Van Jones' book, The Green Collar Economy, it really spoke to me in a way that said that a lot of things we were doing were already at the intersection of environmentalism and sustainability.
So you've talked about, you have this cool organization, Green the Church, but you had a green church from the very beginning. How did you get into that formal organization of Green the Church?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think, once I read Van Jones' book, The Green Collar Economy, I became a Green for All fellow. And a part of our program that year was, and there were people, from urban and rural environments, people who were rapping, right? They took that book and they were putting together rhymes and rhythms around this intersection. People from some of our larger green organizations were a part, and they're talking about it from their vestige. And I was in a meeting with a young man who was a Native American and a young man who was from coal country. And in that, meeting, all three of us looked at who are the gatekeepers in our community. For the reservation, it was still the chiefs. For coal country, it was the union bosses. And in that moment, I said, if these things are going to be true in the African-American community, that pastors were still a part of our gatekeepers. And so they started Green the Res. One started Green Coal Country, and I started Green the Church.
So that's just, I love that. But what does Green the Church mean? What is that?
Yeah, so our three pillars center around amplifying green liberation theology. So we want congregations to understand the liberative nature of the Black church, founded in many ways as a pillar for liberation. And so understanding ourselves historically, philosophically, and theologically. So understanding our history, why I talk about Holly, Louisiana, why I talk about kind of Black church and the civil rights movement. All of those things are part and parcel. And understanding theologically where we see in Bible earth care, where we see in Bible astrology and all of these pieces, all this science and stuff that's in the word. We really want to remember our past, which is a lot of it is Aboriginal, right? A lot of it is indigenous practices, but still seen in the text. And so we want to make sure that our choirs are singing in such a way that our children are learning from a Christian education standpoint, vacation, Bible school, right? All those pieces. And then secondly, our amplifying green liberation theology, building, promoting sustainable practices. We want to make sure that all of our churches are growing food on church-owned land. We want to make sure that our churches are doing composting and recycling. We want to make sure that our Christian education departments, no matter what area of Christian education, again, the choir, whatever, have green practices as a part of it. That our trustees are looking into things like renewable energy, building efficiency. I often say that we don't own a lot of skyscrapers in the Black church, but we own a lot of faith buildings in urban and rural environments. And all of those buildings have to be retrofitted with clean air and clean water. So when I say we're going to green the Black church, I literally mean that. And then finally, building power for political and economic change. So one of our big things this year, we've got like 15 contracts for churches that are doing large scale renewable energy projects, what we call revenue generating microgrids. So we're doing solar, battery, and EV charging. And so we're really to the point where we're lowering our carbon footprint, but that we're also keeping the dollar moving in the Black community as much as possible. Yeah, and doing a lot of that right there in the ATL.
Okay. Well, in the context of Green the Church, what is the role of faith-based organizations in the sustainability movement, the climate change movement, and care for creation?
Yeah. So I've been a part of Interfaith Power and Light since 2010.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and in fact, I was on the board in Colorado when I transferred back to California. Sally Bingham reached out and been rocking with her ever since. And note that the role of the church nationally and internationally is huge. There's still a lot of influence with places of faith. And people, again, when they go to their religious books, find all kind of information, knowledge, and I'd say doctrine around why living with the planet and on the planet is so very important. And for our communities, some of them have kind of an escapism kind of theology, kind of this world ain't my home. Everything about the planet is evil, and I can't wait to kind of die and leave. And so we're wrestling with those two kind of pillars, right? Is church liberative or is church escapism? And so battling with that. So churches, I think, have so much to practice, even down to just having a pulpit where we're sharing, if we're doing these things and being more sustainable, caring for the planet at the church, then people may follow suit and do that in their homes and in their individual practices.
That's a lot about, that building the kingdom here and now on earth and co-creators with God. So that's pretty great. As you've been talking about this, it sounds like you are really reaching into those underserved communities or underrepresented communities and doing this work and allowing the people themselves to lift themselves up. Is that a lot about what you're doing?
Most definitely. Our values center around resilience, aboriginality, courage, and empowerment. We really want to empower communities or them to acknowledge the power that they already have. When we were founded to do two things: to be a repository, to tell the story of what the Black church was doing in the spaces of sustainability and environmentalism, and then to be a catalyst. We wanted to create some gravity by bringing the stories together. It's not like we're not doing it. It's probably 5 or 10%. But when you get that 5 or 10% from all over the country together, then that's a powerful place. And it can be a place of gravity to then bring others in and to get them to be a part. So we work with a lot of green organizations, from the Sierra Club to the Nature's Conservancy, those who want to do projects in urban and rural environments. And we educate the Black church so that we're closer to yes, so that they can be a part of these new technologies. So our children can be intricate in STEM technology and the whole nine.
That brings the question then, as the Catholic Church, and specifically, you've been really diving deep into the Black church and the Aboriginal and indigenous part that they play. How do you see that interaction happening within the Catholic Church and B, other cultures other than the Black community?
Well, again, I think, so one reason as a part of Interfaith Power and Light, when I looked around, there were a lot of people of faith, but not a lot of Black churches, right? And so because of the world that we live in and the stratification, and if I'm talking about the Black church, I'm talking about Black Catholic churches, right? I'm talking about Black Presbyterian churches, Black United Methodist churches, because the statistics are true across the board. Even in wealthy Black communities, it's still less solar happening on their roof than it is on others, right? So I felt like because of the stratification that exists, the Black churches need their own table for their own language, for their own empowerment. So then it's easier for them to come to the table with others. When Laudato Si came out, we held a 3 or 4 part session at the church where I pastored, and we opened it up to all of the communities came in, and we opened up and we read together, we studied together. Even my seminary trained African Americans, they came in to help prepare the food and all that type of stuff. But when everybody came together, they went in the other room and sat down. They didn't feel like they were a part of this. They didn't feel like they were a part. And a part of that is how we talk about it ourselves and knowledge. So a part of why Green the Church is so focused on the Black community is that ultimately we have to be willing and ready to come to the table. And so we really work as that bridge, because in and of itself, we found over the years that we're just not coming.
And I love the fact that you're talking about empowering, because that document, Laudato Si, called us all. I mean, that document was written and addressed to every person of goodwill on this earth, and we all share this earth as our home. So I love the fact that you guys broke this open and you studied it and you talked about it. And one of the things that we've been working together on is, how do we get people to, across all the different faith traditions, but how do we get people to dig in, to take this document and this work that you're doing and bring it to life and activate it? How do we do that?
Well, I mean, for us, we're having our 15th year national summit in Atlanta on October 12th through the 14th. And it is a coming together of that sort. It's going to be both in person as well as virtual. But every time that we do anything, we are always welcoming. And even though this is like Green the Church for the Black church, we know that we cannot do this alone, that so many people have so much knowledge and information, are excited. Every time that we come together, we expect an interfaith crowd moving, coming, being in agreement, saying, yes, this is our hour. So that's part and parcel of how it happens. We have to invite one another into our own spaces. I just did I was invited to a Jewish synagogue here in San Francisco, took my family, and it was life-changing for them as well as my kids, right?
I went through that the first time that I had gone with my Muslim friends, and it was life-changing for me too. But to realize and recognize that we're all focusing on, how do we care for this home that our Creator's given us?
Well, we've got a couple more minutes. I need you to put on your Baptist minister collar and give us a sustainability, give us faith, faith-oriented people and listeners a call to action for sustainability and climate change and environmental justice.
Well, 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, pray and seek my face, that they will hear from heaven and God will heal the land. We really believe that the world is out of balance. I don't have to tell you from, what we watch on the news, there's a lot of fear permeating. And where there's fear, there's often violence. And I think not only a call to prayer, but a call to make sure that we're getting to know each other from places other than the 6 o'clock news is vastly important. However we think about coming together is so very important. So I think that's big. I think the other call to action is Genesis 1:3, says, in the beginning, God made heaven and earth without form and void, and God said, let there be light. We really have to lean on the light and the power that is given us from a natural sense, instead of continuing to try to live our lives off of dead things. I think it's bringing us into unbalance.
Well, amen, brother. That's
now it's time for the offering.
Pass the plates.
Okay. Well, as we come to a close, can you give us a website or email address or some contact information for people that want to know more about you and more about Green the Church?
Oh, please, and thank you so much. You can find us at www.greenthechurch.org. And you can find us with the same handle on Facebook, Instagram, and you can find me at Ambrose Carroll at LinkedIn. Would love to be in dialogue and communication.
Thanks for sharing all that. I think the biggest message that I really got out of, and thank you for helping me to understand a little bit more, and the idea of this invitation into relationship between cultures, between communities. What a great way to end the conversation.
It is. Well, thank you so much for meeting us at Faith and Sustainability, so you can add that to the CNN and the HuffPost and everything that you were on Faith and Sustainability. Thank you.
I'm going first.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you all. Peace and blessings.
Stay connected with us on social media and share your thoughts using the hashtag Faith and Sustainability.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review because, as you know, your support's what helps us continue on this journey. Leonard, we'll see everyone next time
at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.